Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. You know, if you're learning Spanish, you have probably hit a wall at some point. And I mean a wall built entirely out of confusing verb conjugations. But don't worry, because today we are breaking that wall down. We're going to look at this through the lens of a totally relatable study session between two friends. Let's call them Leo and Maya. They're sitting in a coffee shop, textbooks open, looking completely frustrated, trying to conquer the ultimate Spanish grammar showdown, the conditional versus the subjunctive. We're going to follow their conversation to build a quick, bulletproof guide to mastering these really tricky forms. So picture Leo. He's staring at his notes, he lets out this huge sigh and asks Maya the golden question. What would happen if, or what do I hope happens? Now this question hits the nail right on the head when it comes to the most common errors students make. We constantly confuse the imaginary world of what would happen with the highly subjective world of our internal feelings, hopes, and doubts. As Maya points out to Leo, in English, we usually just lean on helper words like would or might. But in Spanish, the entire shape of the verb actually changes depending on whether you're dreaming up a scenario or expressing a feeling. Section 1. Two very different worlds. Exploring grammar. Leo frames this big concept beautifully by defining his favorite of the two, which is the simple conditional. He calls it the imaginary scenario. This is your direct one-to-one equivalent to adding the word would in English. It's this world where actions depend entirely on a condition. And the structure is actually super friendly. Instead of chopping off the end of the verb like you usually do, you take the full infinitive, like amar, to love, and you just glue the new endings right onto it. So amar just becomes amaría. You are literally just adding on to the action to make it hypothetical. Leo gives Maya this classic, everyday example that I think pretty much all of us can relate to. Yo viajaría más si tuviera dinero, meaning I would travel more if I had money. This perfectly demonstrates a standard hypothesis using the conditional. The traveling hasn't happened yet, right? It's entirely dependent on the condition of having money. So the word viajaría captures that entire I would travel sentiment, all in one neat imaginary packet. But then Leo reminds Maya that the conditional isn't just for wild hypotheses or daydreaming about expensive vacations. It's actually heavily used for everyday politeness. Look at this phrase, ¿Podrías ayudarme? Could you help me? Instead of bluntly demanding help, the conditional softens the request. It essentially says, in an imaginary world where you have the time, would you be able to help me? It's an absolutely crucial tool for sounding polite and respectful in everyday Spanish. Maya, sipping her coffee, decides it's finally her turn. She counters by explaining the subjunctive. If the conditional is the imaginary scenario, the subjunctive is the world of subjectivity. This mood lives entirely in the mind of the speaker. It doesn't declare cold, hard facts. Instead, it expresses desires, doubts, emotions, or necessities. And grammatically, it signals this shift into the subjective world by changing the thematic vowel. For example, verbs ending in R suddenly take an E, and ER or IR verbs take an A. It's kind of like the verb itself is putting on a completely different outfit just to show it's dealing with feelings. Maya provides a great everyday example for this one too. Espero que vengas a la fiesta. I hope you come to the party. Notice how the subjunctive almost always depends on a trigger, usually verbs of influence or emotion. The trigger right here is espero, I hope. Because Maya is expressing a desire, the verb venir transforms into vengas. It's not a stated fact that you are actually coming to the party. It's just a hope, living in Maya's mind. And here is another fantastic use of the subjunctive from Maya, but this time she's expressing pure doubt. No creo que sea verdad. I don't believe it's true. The phrase no creo que creates this shadow of doubt, which basically forces the verb ser to become the subjunctive sea. It beautifully illustrates how the subjunctive mood acts like a grammatical filter for all of our personal uncertainties and beliefs. Section 2. The magic formula. When worlds collide. Now, when these two worlds collide, our friends realize they really need a map. So they actually map out this magic formula right on a coffee shop napkin. Let's walk through it piece by piece together. Step 1. You start with si, meaning if. Step 2. You state the unlikely or imaginary condition using the imperfect subjunctive. Step 3. You state the result of that condition using the simple conditional. It's basically a chain reaction. The subjunctive sets up the impossible or unlikely reality, and then the conditional tells you what would happen in that alternate universe. And this brilliantly illustrates that exact formula in action. Leo says, Si fuera rico, compraría una isla. If I were rich, I would buy an island. Let's break down this ultimate intersection. Fuera is the imperfect subjunctive. That's the imaginary condition, the alternate reality where Leo somehow has millions of dollars. Compraría is the simple conditional. That's the direct result of that imaginary reality. Condition, then result. Honestly, once you lock this pattern in, these complex sentences become an absolute breeze.
Section 3. Key differences. Avoiding common mistakes.
Maya points out that even with the magic formula, it is so easy to get tripped up. First, she explicitly points out the structural difference between the two. The simple conditional is actually a verbal tense. It places an action in a specific time. Specifically, it's often thought of as the future of the past. The subjunctive, on the other hand, is a verbal mood. It doesn't tell you when an action happens at all. It tells you the speaker's attitude towards that action. You really don't want to confuse a tense with a mood. One is all about time and conditions. The other is all about feelings and reality. Next up, Maya contrasts the core focus of the two forms. You must remember that the conditional is always looking at the consequence or the result. Think, I would buy a car. The subjunctive is entirely focused on the intention, the desire, or the doubt behind the action. Think, I want you to buy a car. Keeping this contrast in your head helps you instantly figure out exactly which tool you need for the sentence you're trying to build. To wrap up their review, Leo gives Maya the ultimate quick reference keywords. If you are ever stuck trying to speak on the fly, just remember these two words. The conditional keyword is pasaría, meaning what would happen. The subjunctive keyword is que, as in quiero que, or I want that. If your sentence revolves around a que driven by emotion or doubt, you are firmly in subjunctive territory. But if it revolves around a consequence, you are in conditional territory. Section 4. Fill in the blanks. Let's test yourself. All right, Leo and Maya are testing each other, and now it is your turn. Here is the very first challenge. Si Blanc Rico compraría una isla. The verb you need to use is ser, to be. Think back to the magic formula we literally just talked about. You have si starting the phrase and compraría, the conditional, acting as the result. What form of ser goes into that blank to express that unlikely condition? Take a quick second to think about it. And the answer is fuera. Si fuera rico, compraría una isla. Remember, the si clause in our magic formula always takes the imperfect subjunctive to set up that imaginary alternate reality. If you guessed fuera in your head, you absolutely nailed it. Let's try just one more. Here is the second fill-in-the-blank challenge based on that everyday example Leo used earlier. Yo viajaría más si blank dinero. The verb here is tener, to have. But notice how the order is flipped this time? The conditional result, viajaría, comes first, followed by the si condition. So what goes in the blank? The answer is tuviera. Yo viajaría más si tuviera dinero. It honestly doesn't matter if the si clause comes at the very beginning or the very end of the sentence. The pieces fit together perfectly exactly the same way. The condition immediately following si takes the imperfect subjunctive. Every single time. So Leo and Maya close their books, finally feeling like they've cracked the code. And honestly, I hope you feel the exact same way right now. By understanding the conditional as the imaginary result and the subjunctive as the subjective mood of desires and doubts, you really do unlock a whole new level of fluency. So I'll leave you with this. Are you ready to take these formulas, go out there, and master your own imaginary and subjective worlds in Spanish? Keep practicing, look out for those everyday examples in your conversations, and I promise you, these two worlds will become second nature before you know it.